The Venture Brothers is Adult Swim's longest-running, most enigmatic, and greatest show of all time.
And you're gonna love it!
But it seems like entirely too many people, even fans of adult animation, have never heard of Adventure Brothers. So today, I'm gonna convince you why you not only need to, but want to watch the entire series front to back. And there's never been a better time to do it now that the finale movie is available on Max with the rest of the series. But Venture is, unfortunately, famously difficult to get into. So then we're gonna talk about why that is and how you, the viewer, can beat that story and live your life in the Ventureverse to the fullest. And hey, stay tuned to the end to find out if the guild finally approved my request to make Pete Davidson my arch nemesis. The initial concept of Venture Bros was specifically a parody of Jonny Quest, a classic Saturday morning Hanna-Barbera boy adventurer cartoon. The Venture pilot premiered in 2003 with a full first season following in 2004. But over the course of its 20-year run, Venture Bros evolved into something much greater and truly singular in its vision and tone. While the early episodes, for better or for worse, fit in pretty well with Space Ghost and Robot Chicken on Adult Swim, this show quickly arrives at a place that is quite separated from that ethos and aesthetic without being wholly disconnected.
This is arch-villaining to you.
It's a stolen Rembrandt. That's nefarious. That's kind of evil, no?
Basically, the show follows Dr. Thaddeus S. Rusty Venture, once a boy adventurer in the spirit of the aforementioned Saturday morning cartoons, now a middle-aged super scientist and the father of his own twin boys, Hank and Dean.
Through there?
I can't fit my shoulders in. I bet you could fit.
Great! Way to be useless, Dean. When I was your age, all I did was crawl through holes. Holes half that size, mind you.
He drags them through many of the same shenanigans he went through in his childhood, while also trying to be a better parent than his father, the late Jonas Venture, a wildly successful and publicly beloved super-heroic figure whose shadow Rusty is still trying to escape. The family is usually accompanied by their bodyguard, the world's most desirable, capable, and macho man, Barack Samson. If you've ever seen Venture Bros content leaking into the mainstream, it was probably Brock Samson. And then there's Doc's archenemy, the Monarch, a perfectly spiteful and incompetent butterfly-themed villain who never fails to steal the show.
What color is it? Is it diabolical? Or at least butterfly color?
And his partner, the subtle genius and fan favorite, Dr. Girlfriend.
Aren't you gonna...
Hank, you drive. I never drive mad.
Brock would never let us drive his
Don't
truck.
be such a candy-ass, Dane. Get in the back.
Hey!
These are the main characters that we tend to follow. But there are probably 100 secondary, tertiary, and whatever the word is for 15-iary characters you'll meet along the way and fall in love with just as much. Like
Dr. Henry Killinger, and this is my magic murder bag.
a weird mishmash of Mary Poppins, real-life diplomat/war criminal Henry Kissinger, and like Satan, I guess? The way Venture spoofs and creates characters is truly one of a kind. And the creators have an incredible talent for making these characters and their interactions feel three-dimensional and real. Partly through brilliant voice acting and direction, but mostly through their idiosyncratic writing style, often adapting conversations from their real lives into the scripts.
Roger. Dispatching blackout team now. What are you doing? I hate that song.
But the beauty of Venture is that it doesn't take the form you'd expect from this sort of high-concept, wacky spoof. A lesser production would focus chiefly on the zany adventures the gang journeys off to. Venture Brothers is much more interested in what happens when a super scientist decides to have a yard sale.
Doc, you have a table over there with a sign that says Laser Death Ray Bargain Bin.
Or when the boys go off on their first double date and end up eating in the same restaurant as Dr. Venture's proclaimed arch nemesis. And because there's less focus on outlandishly wacky hijinks, there's much more emphasis put on characters and their relationships and development. There is a very particular tone, style, and sense of humor to this show that had never been done before and hasn't been recreated since.
Choose your weapons.
Is this them?
Are these they?
Who talks like that?
Out of the way! I am the leader here. I will distribute the... Where? Are these they?
Though it's an obvious influence on a lot of more recent works, like Harley Quinn on Max. This comes from the fact that Venture Bros is uniquely and pristinely the vision of its two creators, Jackson Public and Doc Hammer. See, in the entire 7 seasons and a movie run of this show, there is only one episode that isn't written by one or both of the creators, and that was penned by Ben Edlund, an old friend and past collaborator of Publix from when they worked together on The Tick. Venture released only 7 seasons over 2 decades. That's like a season every 3 years, if your math isn't so hot. That's because Doc and Jackson handle as much as they possibly can by themselves.
There's only 2 of us, and so we write it all, and then I direct it. I haven't had a weekend off in like a year and a half, man.
It is so unbelievably rare for anyone to be given this kind of space and freedom when creating for television, and I could not be happier that these are the guys who won that lottery and made the most of it. I am forever in your debt, Mike Lazo, for letting them get away with this and stay on the air. These 2 friends are virtuosos of the craft, and Venture Brothers is truly auteur television because of it. I think this is absolutely on the level of anything by the most revered big screen writers and directors. Whatever credit you're giving to Christopher Nolan, the boys in the Astro Base deserve it more. The absolute genius of Doc and Jackson is that they are pop cultural wizards, absolute all-knowing sages of television, music, movies, comics, you name it. You know how Kasparov beat Deep Blue at chess? These 2 could go toe-to-toe with Wikipedia on pop culture trivia. But unlike what you might see from something like Family Guy or Robot Chicken, often airing right next to Venture, this is used for so much more than just empty references or low-hanging digs. This writing team would never rest on the laurels of, hey, remember Duran Duran? By itself being a satisfying or complete joke or scene. Instead, they opt for, I don't know, an extended scene where a goofy arch-villain threatens to undo the development of alternative culture in the 80s by erasing a key prop in a Duran Duran music video from time itself. The show is littered with esoteric, weird, and sometimes lengthy calls to other media or events, but it's always done in service of the characters.
Hey, guess what? Nobody cares who would win in a crazy fantasy fistfight between Anne Frank and Lizzie Borden. We never should have brought the henchmen.
Real people talk about the media around and important to them, and it makes the residents of the Ventureverse feel very real. Seeing how much Billy Quizboy and Pete White actually care about what Duran Duran means to the culture gives us a better idea of who they are than almost anything else could. And with Doc and Jackson's vast command of culture comes an incredible understanding of tropes, expectations, the status quo, and how to subvert or go beyond what would be the standard. At its most fundamental level, Venture Bros is the product of 2 of the world's foremost ultra-nerd superfans. And this is their magnum opus, demonstrating that they know every beat of what makes something indispensable and worthy of obsession. Their vision always ends up being the most fully realized, fleshed out, usually unpredictable, and often grand in scope version of whatever movie cliche they feel like taking on, or superhero archetype they want to play with. This is best showcased through the Guild of Calamitous Intent's approach to institutionalized, costumed, and cartoony villainy, and all the bureaucracy and economics that come with that, which I promise is so much funnier than it sounds.
Welcome to the Guild of Calamitous Intent. Ta-da! Please step on the grating and put these on. Have you eaten breakfast?
Oh, not yet.
Good.
And maybe their greatest talent is being able to utilize references and allusions that are so numerous and deep in a way that isn't alienating. Like, I've never even seen an episode of Johnny Quest. It doesn't really matter. Oftentimes the jokes and plot lines will still make plenty of sense and remain satisfying at face level, but hit extra hard if you are familiar with that source material. Or in other cases, it just makes you want to do a little research to understand what's so funny or what's being parodied. And I know you are into that sort of thing. You're already watching this 20-minute video about a cartoon you haven't seen. You're gonna spend hours on the Venture Bros Wikia and you're going to love it.
Now push that subscribe button. Come on, you already made it this far.
Of course, with that grandiosity and ambition does come great responsibility, or other problems or something. The Ventureverse builds up a vast amount of lore and dozens of really fleshed out and well-developed characters, meaning that, oftentimes, in only 20 minutes of runtime, there are a lot of things they're counting on you to already understand without a reminder.
And I wouldn't bother looking for that shrink ray your father built. You sold it to the albino and his tiny companion. Ta-ta.
crap.
When you remember that this show originally aired on live television with seasons literal years apart, you can see how it might be a little bit difficult to draw in new fans, or hold the attention of the average Adult Swim viewer at 2 in the morning in who knows what mental state. Like, there are things set up as early as the second episode of the series that lead to major payoffs in Season 7, 15 years later. And this issue of accessibility is made even worse by the fact that the first season is just a little bit rough. Lots of things about the rules of the world and tone of the show just aren't quite locked down yet, so starting from the very beginning might not hook a lot of people who give it a shot. I think a really good example of this is Rusty's diet pills. This is referenced quite a bit in the first season, and it's not wielded very intentionally, even if it is meant to show how Dr. Venture is trying to deal with his difficult childhood. It feels much more like, hey, check out the edge on including addiction in a cartoon. That's early 2000s adult animated comedy for you. But in later seasons, this thread gets dropped pretty much completely, and the show finds less callous ways to address Doc's lingering trauma and how he deals with it. There are even certain characters who deal with addiction issues of their own, and the writers manage to thread the needle on still writing it to be comical, but not without sympathy, which I think is what Season 1 Rusty was lacking. And this is another element of the genius of Venture Bros. Despite being forged in the sometimes problematic fires of early Family Guy era Adult Swim, the creators grew alongside their audience, and that's totally reflected in the show. For example, they stopped making poorly aged gay jokes and started making super likable and well-rounded queer characters.
Nice shot, Queen Midas. Now she's got money for toes.
They even managed to seamlessly work in a subtle apology or explanation for earlier use of no-no words.
We don't use those slurs.
Basically, what I'm saying is that the earliest episodes lack the pacing, sharpness, and empathy of the later seasons. Your same values as a person that may lead you to drop the show after a couple of episodes could also be the reason you might just fall in love with Venture eventually. Public and Hammer make up for their missteps by simply being better, which is really all I could ask for. So, what is my recommendation to perfectly indoctrinate you into the cult of Venture? No matter what, I think you should skip the pilot on a first viewing. It's dubiously canon, lacks so much of the charm that makes the show so essential, and really adds very little to the viewing experience. If you're already convinced and willing to finish out the first 2 seasons on faith alone, I think starting with the first proper episode, Dia de los Dangerous, and going in order is a fine path. But in my professional Venture Industries opinion, the best possible episode you can start with is Escape to the House of Mummies Part 2.
I know what you're thinking, just bear with me.
Part of the fundamental joke of this episode is that there is no actual Part 1 or Part 3. So if you don't fully understand the lore and context around it, the episode still works. In some ways, it might even be better that way.
That's very impressive. It looks like he hates his foot.
Go still? He's been doing that all day.
The bonus joke of this episode is the implication that the hijinks that the Venture family is caught up in is the kind of crazy stuff they're getting up to in-universe most of the time, despite not usually being what's actually focused on in episodes. So it does do a really good job of establishing what kind of world the show's characters come from. And if you have a good time with this one, I would also say that the next 2 episodes, 20 Years to Midnight and Victor Echo November, are actually 2 of the best in the whole series, and also work pretty well even without understanding all of the plot that leads up to them. And once you're won over from those, loop back to Dia de los Dangerous and have fun with the 7 seasons and a movie of bliss ahead of you. I swear to you, if you get some friends together and watch this show, you will find so many lines that will make all of you laugh for years. And they might be lines that no one else on Earth finds quite as funny. It really is special television in a way that feels personal somehow. You cannot imagine how much mileage my friends got out of Orange Jerkin! And
we can take my Nissan Stanza,
which probably does not make any sense out of context, which is why you've gotta watch Venture Brothers. And just to clarify, I actually do like Season 1 quite a bit. It's far from awful, but it's also different enough from the rest of the run that I just don't feel like it's fair for people to judge and give up on the show based on those episodes alone. But there's something weirdly perfect about how the beginnings of Venture Bros don't quite line up with where the show eventually ends up. One of my absolute, consistently favorite things about the writing in Venture is that Hammer and Public are gods of the anticlimax. The ways they use misdirection and expectation to create perfectly timed and executed jokes.
Give me the hand of Osiris.
Give me head.
You didn't just say that.
I absolutely did. What are you gonna do about it?
I'm about to kill your sons.
Or incredibly satisfying, unpredictable payoffs is second to none. And I think this means that, unfortunately, there's no way the show could have ended other than being renewed for an 8th season, then cancelled mid-production, and finally brought back for a movie to try and tie things up. That's just the way the Ventureverse works. But it's also extremely clear that there are plenty more tales to be told in this world, and the creators have emphatically gone on record saying that they still want to tell them, which is the main reason I'm making this video. I'd do literally anything to see more Venture, and I'm pretty sure you would too once you've finished the whole series. So this video is me doing my part to get those streaming numbers up so that someone in charge revives Venture Bros for another 7 seasons, or whatever we could get. It's actually a legitimate possibility, so I cannot thank you enough for watching my video and taking an interest in my favorite show of all time. That was just the mail, but I did get this letter from Pete Davidson, which says I should eat a duck and go back to Fire Emblem content. Well, till then.